don't think it would be an understatement to say that we're living through life-changing and challenging times.
Hey, we're back, and I hope you enjoyed that series of interviews and conversations I've had with a bunch of different educators thinking about our future of education. And some of the conversations were so enlightening for me, especially things that came up frequently. Some things like building relationships, humanizing, listening, creating great environments for people to work. These are all things that consistently seem to come up, and so I wanted to talk through some of that in summary of these videos. So through these interviews, I've gathered about 7 key points that I wanted to share with you today. The first one is just this question around, do we need to prepare students the same way we've always prepared them pretty much for the whole last century, and especially over the last 3-4 decades, we've really gotten into this notion of standardization and an idea that we need to break out these standards across a complete school year. And I think there's some question right now as to whether that's how we want to prepare students going forward into the future, and how we want to approach the schooling experience going forward, because it does feel a very kind of mechanical, to say the least. The second thing that continues to come up over and over in all of the conversations is just the importance of engaging the community. There are several things that came up in that context. One is we have to build trust with the community. The community can be a co-creator of solutions that the education system might need, and we have to bring people along and we have to understand their context so that we could serve them better. The third concept that came through loud and clear is, especially in the world that we're in with the pandemic and just the disconnectedness people feel, building those humanizing relationships and building that trust on a one-to-one basis is really important. What I like to do when I'm reflecting on whether I'm spending enough time one-on-one with people is just by looking at my calendar. I could quickly tell if I'm getting into kind of tactical, mechanical, like group meeting discussions, or if I'm making time for individuals that I usually don't connect with. The fourth piece that these leaders really seem to hang on to is just the time needed to reflect, and the time we've lost through kind of the remoteness that we're experiencing to reflect. Because a lot of times what we did was we would do short reflections between meetings when we drove from one building to the other, when we got on planes, even when we went from one room to the other, we had a time to pause and think about what we're going to do next. And so often right now, especially moving from one virtual meeting to another, there's hardly any transition time, and we're having kind of difficulty making cognitive shifts between one concept and another, and we're losing some of that time that's necessary for reflection. Data, of course, is the fifth area, and data is something that we really need to look at differently. I think we all know that data is so critical, but I don't think we take a lot of time thinking about what questions we want to answer and if we're answering these questions in the right way. The problem with looking at data the wrong way is it actually creates biases, and sometimes adding multiple angles the wrong way will reinforce biases and systemic issues that prevent us from thinking differently about the conditions. So really looking at what questions we want to answer. Are we answering the questions properly? Are we looking at the data properly? We need to reset how we look at our education data today. The sixth point that is really important is recognizing that we're not all at the same place in our own development and our own understanding of new concepts, or times where we have to unpack or undo our own beliefs and create new ones. We're all at different places, and we need to design systems and conversations that allow us to bring somebody from one place to the other so that we can develop and evolve together. But when we leave people behind and expect people to come along, then that's when the gap gets even bigger. And so we don't want to do that for students, and we don't want to do that for the adults that we work with. And the seventh point is really this need for us to listen better. And where this is coming up a lot is just the need for us to co-create solutions with diverse ideas. That for some reason, I feel like this year, so many books have come out around the diversity of ideas, having a bunch of different opinions to make better decisions. And what we're seeing is this pattern that we can't live in silos anymore, and we have to learn a lot quicker. And so co-creating things requires a lot of listening. And in order for us to survive and in order for us to evolve the way we do education, we need to create a more open system instead of a siloed system. So during my interview with Shane Saphir, who wrote this book, The Listening Leader, I came across this quote by James Baldwin, and I wanted to read this quote to you because I think it says a lot about the direction we need to go in education, and it really came across in many different ways from the interviews and conversations I had with these leaders. So the quote goes like this: "The purpose of education finally is to create in a person the ability to look at the world for himself, to make his own decisions, to say to himself this is black or this is white, to decide for himself whether there is a God in heaven or not, to ask questions of the universe and to learn to live with those questions is the way he achieves his own identity." And I wanted to emphasize that last piece, which is achieving our own identity, is so critical and something that I think people are really grappling with these days. And we really need to start thinking about how the conditions we create in our school systems, whether it's for our students, whether it's for our teachers or the administrators or the staff that support school systems, how can we allow people to be their whole selves and bring their identity and yet feel belonging and inclusion in the communities that are built around school systems? So I wanted to share with you this framework that I've been thinking about based on all of these conversations, and I hope it's helpful for you guys too. So what I noticed is that in the center of this circle are key components. Context for clarity, just really spending the time to get the context of where people are coming from, the understanding that you need so that you could actually develop solutions that fit those needs. To work at the speed of trust, and this is really the idea that we have to lock arms and bring people along in this work, and if some people get too far ahead, then it's really hard to make the changes. We have to make the change in a group so that we could move systems forward and change those systems and policies that are necessary. And then the third piece is really the idea of thick listening, which David Kirkland really talks about, and it's the idea that we need to actually listen to people and pay attention to humanize that connection that we are often missing through social media, through text messages. And so how do we rebuild that connection and make those deposits into relationships is really what we're talking about here. So once we understand those three core things, then the question might be, what do we need to support those three things? And the four things that came up through all of these conversations are these. And the first is truth and data, and we need to fix policies, not people. So the way we're going to do that is to relook at the way we spend time in data and perhaps ask different questions. And those new types of questions will give us data that allows us to change policies. The next piece is grace with allies. As we continue to grow and evolve in our understanding of concepts like racism, we really need to have grace with allies, because all of us are going to make mistakes, and in different conditions, we're just not going to know how to behave or understand the context of all of the conditions. And so through this process, we're all gonna make mistakes, and I hope that we're able to understand that that happens, but at the same time be really firm about where we need to make those adjustments and have the uncomfortable conversation sometimes to course correct when needed. The third element is inclusion through adaptability. And if you really want to implement practices around inclusion, you have to be adaptable, right? When you're fixed, then that's when it's hard to allow other people to come in and for other people to feel that belonging that's necessary. So we have to stop saying things like, that's the way we've been doing it, or that's how it's been done. And we have to say, hey, you know what? Like, we need to adjust the way we're doing things, and so we need to adapt there. The last piece here is identity is created by habits. And, you know, in James Baldwin's piece, he also talks about the search for our own identities, and really individuals have identities through the habits that they have every day. And I know I talk about this a lot, so there are a bunch of other videos you could check out that where I talk about identities and habits. But what I did want to reinforce here is the stuff that we do as individuals every day actually create our own identities, and the things that our organizations do all the time also create the organizational identity. And so in order for us to change what we're known for, the identity of the organization, we actually have to change organizational behaviors and habits. So to wrap up, I wanted to share with you Education Element's own vision. And our vision is to bring out the best in people and their communities by designing school systems that are adaptable. We need to move to an kind of an open system, one that is more fluid and flexible and evolving. That's how we grow and learn. And so in order to create that learning organization, we really need to approach it this way, with this adaptability. And the way we believe that happens is through our tagline, schools grow when people grow. As we get better and as we learn and improve ourselves and go through the struggle of that learning process, that's how our communities and our schools will grow. So I hope you enjoyed this series. It's the first time we've tried anything like this, and we're experimenting ourselves. So as we wrapped up this series, I decided, you know, I think it's worthwhile for us to dig a little bit deeper into the 7 areas that I mentioned before. And so I'm gonna release another set of episodes, series 2 per se, of Bridging the Gap, to go deeper into each of those topics. And hopefully you'll find inspiration and you'll find motivation through these videos, and come back soon. Peace.